And now I have the honor to introduce you all to Michael Göthe. And Michael is one of our agile organization coach here at CRISP, and he is passionate about transforming organizations and businesses and become truly agile organization that creates fantastic values for customers and to find an inspirational place for people to work in. And Michael is here today to tell us more about navigating complexity using WaysFinder. So, Michael.
Thank you, Susanna. I'm going to see just to get the screen sharing started. Okay, you should see a Miro board here. Great, so I will introduce and share a framework that I've been using a lot the last couple of years. It's called WaysFinder. I'll go through all the different parts of it, how it's kind of built up and the principles behind. And I'm going to use it, explain it by comparing a bit to how we navigate ourselves in life and in nature. Also, I'm going to share examples of how I used it with the clients. So first of all, WaysFinder, I learned it from Sonja Brignot. She's a researcher into natural sciences and the complexity and how to navigate in complexity. You might recognize the Canadian model here by Dave Snowden. She has been working with Dave Snowden for, I think, 15 years or more. And when we had Dave at CRISP, we had also a workshop with Sonja, and I was saying that she will tell you what you learned with the course with Dave, as he is more academic and use difficult language. Sonja often make it very concrete and easy to understand. So I really like her framework, WaysFinder. She got inspired also by the Polynesian wayfinding cultures. So they navigated across the seas and the Pacific Ocean using stars, birds, moons, waves, etc. And personally, I don't know much about the Polynesian wayfinder, but just where I live, there's a lot of Viking burial areas. And Vikings, they could also navigate across seas for very long ways and find their ways back, as also many animals can. And I think I want to illustrate it here also with my daughter. We're out on Tre Kronor, it's called, the old Navy replica. That's the background a bit about WaysFinder. So when working with WaysFinder, typically I want to start with the orientation part down here. And I have a description a bit here, showing a bit what about the orientation. And when we are in complexity, everything is contextual. In the Canadian model there, you on the right side have everything ordered. You can use project planning, waterfall, etc. But when it's complex, you really need to understand the landscape, understand the context. So here are some examples of how to understand landscape when I work with clients. Driver mapping, for example, is kind of organizing, looking into the current situation so that each person have a sense of it. This is also a tool called sense making, where you can actually map out different behaviors, actions, etc. Here we use it to map out different activities one company did in product discovery. And here is a similar mapped out leadership actions. And then you can find patterns and see what stands out. So that's a good base for knowing when to take action, what actions to take. So basically, in complexity, you really need to understand this kind of situational awareness, understanding the orientation. Okay, so once we know where we are, then where are we going? So we will go up here to the setting direction or the intent. So here, okay, going to the direction intent. And it's a bit like the North Star, or having a direction, or like the WaysFinder, they're navigated according to the stars. It's not a very narrow, concrete, specific goal, because in complexity, we don't know what the goal is and it will change. And if we have a very narrow goal, the solution space here, the opportunity space will be very narrow. We cannot be very innovative. So we want to have a direction. And Sonia has a nice example. Like if you state that you're going north, yeah, then we have excluded the option of going south, right? But it's just a direction. It's not a very narrow goal. And a client I work with here, Volvo Cars, the digital area, they put a really good kind of direction. They wanted the experience of buying a car online to be as good as getting into your new Volvo car itself. That is that direction. And then we work with all the product managers to work with their areas. So they set a product intent that were aligning to this overall intent. And after a while, it all made a coherent sense. So it's not really creating alignment. Alignment you can get by coercion or forcing people, but you want to make it connected, coherent. Okay, so going back here, we now have the orientation, we have a direction. Next step is looking at boundaries. There are two kinds of boundaries. This one is a solid line because it's more of a strict boundary. Dave Snowden calls these governing constraints. So those are kind of boundaries that are not really easy to break. I am involved a lot in handball, and there you have specific rules. So if you break the rule, the referee will kind of give you a consequence for breaking the rule. Those are kind of strict, you can't really change them, right? Another example are joints. So a joint is both kind of limiting, you cannot really bend your elbow the wrong way. It's kind of constraining you, but it gives you stability and the opportunity to move. Here we worked with product managers at Paradox. They were like CEOs of their product. They had a lot of freedom, but sometimes they were limiting. They thought they had more constraints than they had. So exploring what freedoms they really had, and they realized that they had budget responsibility, etc. They had a lot of things. So the actual boundary wasn't where they thought it was. This was an agile team at Volvo here. They set up a super agile team in a traditional organization just for them to uncover where are the boundaries, what hinders them from kind of working as an agile team. And another example here is a Telia, a GDPR. You could say that's a law, that's a fixed boundary. You cannot really break the law, that's a big consequence. But someone have given them a spec. You should follow this GDPR spec and implement it. And they came up and said that, oh, this will cost 20 million. But is it really the spec, the actual boundary? No, the law, it's the law that's the boundary. The spec was just someone's interpretation, and they come up with another solution that costed 1 million. Okay, so that was the kind of more constraint. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will have some time for Q&A at the end. Okay, so then they have these other boundaries here, and they are kind of open dotted line and it's a bit squiggly. And that's because they are enabling constraints. Those are not fixed boundaries, but something that we put in place. And you have them in the nature, you have the ecosystem. This is a beaver close to where I live. They really like it here. There's a lot of water. They are free to kind of eat on the grass and trees, etc. And the population is regulated by the environment. You can also kind of see it in riverbanks, directing the water, and the water can rise up over the riverbanks if needed when there's a lot of rain. At work, we put in boundaries ourselves. So those are kind of things that enable us, like some working agreements. This is what we are not okay with doing, and these are things we would like to have. This is the product experimentation team at Volvo Cars. And they said, we will meet at least one user every week and we will deliver code every day. So that's a boundary, something that enabled them to work faster. It's not a fixed, rigid kind of rule that they had to obey by, but it's something that they put in place to be able to go faster. The other team thought they were crazy. They never met any users at all, and maybe they could deliver code once every sprint. Why would you do anything like this? But this was something that enabled them to be more agile, go faster. So that's the enabling constraints, or these kind of open boundaries. Okay, then what about this part here? How would you navigate here? And you can see that this is a cone now. So the cone has kind of some solution space. You don't really know exactly how to reach your end, your intention, but you can have different options here. And just saying that in Agile, oh, we should just experiment. Yeah, but in what direction and how do we make sure it's aligned, etc., or going together? This really helps having this kind of situation awareness, having direction, understanding your fixed boundaries, understanding those enabling boundaries. And then you can more dynamically plan an experiment. So it's little like walking on a path in the mist. So you don't see the end of the path, but as you move further, things start to reveal and you see another 100 meters. And it's still misty, but you just move further and now you see 100 more meters. So it's kind of creating this kind of search space, this opportunity for finding possibilities and finding these adjacent possibilities. What is the next best thing we can do right now? So, for example, designing experiments with the overall intention in mind, and then evaluating with metrics to see, are we getting closer? So it's this, you take you have some options, you choose one option, you move a little further. Now you stand here and say, evaluate, okay, did we go in the right direction? So this is the product team here at Volvo. They are doing design sprints, innovating, redesigning the purchasing flow for ordering Volvo cars. We can also see this kind of model as fractal or kind of scalable. You can think of this as an individual working within the boundaries of a team. Or this could be several teams working in the boundaries of a department. Or this could be different departments working within the boundaries of a company. And that is how we explained also at Volvo Cars how to get common priorities, common ways of working together with squads, tribes on different levels. So we had a really kind of simple fractal setup of how to collaborate across. And this was kind of the helping to have some theory framework. They really wanted to, they started saying, oh, you should use SAFe for some other framework. But I said, no, you're quite a small organization. This is basically what we are intending to do. And this is a more straightforward, simple setup. So that is how you can navigate more dynamically. And of course, you could have objectives, but they are more in the short term. In the long term, we don't have clear kind of measurable goal. But in the short term, we could have some metrics, key success factors, or maybe OKRs that Michael talked about, to see that we are moving in the intended direction. And they will change as we go. But some milestones, OKRs, key success metrics are good here. Also, when it comes to metrics, I think the team over here, they had really checking all the data, not to kind of break any quality metrics and things like this. And that is actually keeping track of this boundary here, that you don't kind of break it. Okay, then. So now we understand situation, we know where we're going, we know the fixed boundaries, the enabling boundaries, we know how to navigate. The next key is really understanding or having a lot of feedback loops. So that makes this kind of system working. And it's as in nature again, there are feedback loops everywhere. So this kind of, you have the water rising up, getting humid, cooling off and turning into rain and ice again. Or in a flock of birds, they're navigating, getting feedback from where they're going, but also from each other. So there are parameters for them how to move. And of course, in sports, we create feedback loops as well. So having a timeout, checking, you cannot really watch the goal score as you're playing. You have to be in the now, but you have your intention, you have a strategy, you are playing for winning, but then you can stop, take a timeout and adjust and getting feedback. And of course, this is the most common thing that we do in Agile. So you have lessons learned, retrospectives. This is a product management team. So they are stopping, reflecting and checking in on their overall strategy. And to the right here, this is a team that really focused on the customer feedback. So they actually created a desk for the customer, and the customer came into the office. So he had his own desk here, and it was painted in the company colors. So you might see this is the union with their company color. So that really invited the customer to sit among the team there 1 or 2 days a week. And sure, you have fast feedback loops. Okay, so we have covered also feedback. So feedback need to be throughout the system. And the last part here is support structure. And if you listen to Dave Snowden talking about complexity, he's using the terminology of scaffolds. Also that I hear it a lot in coaching, it's kind of a bit of jargon. But scaffold, this is like this thing you put up in front of the house. In Swedish, it's byggnadsställning. This is me a couple of years ago amplifying my house. I needed a scaffold to be able to build up the house. And when the house is done and stable, you can remove the scaffold. And you do that in coaching as well. You kind of help people, hold them there. And once they grow, you can remove the support structure. Of course, I have a sports analogy as well. Having tape and glue is key in handball to be able to have support structure. And the coach team is a support structure as well. This is the chapter coaches that I work with. They are creating how they're supporting the members of the chapters. And I think this was really cool example here. The leadership team at DEC. They really wanted to be a support for their organization. They wanted the members to work more agile. They had tried to be really open, inviting people to all hands meeting, presentations, sharing all data, finance, everything, but nothing really happened. So what they did was that we created this leadership location where everything was transparent and everything was on the wall, and then invited people to interact with the data. And they had a literal open door policy because they actually removed the doors. So everybody should be invited in here. And that you had people coming and interacting with them. So that was kind of, the whole room was a scaffold, and visualization as well. Okay, so yeah, I think that is the last part of the actual framework here. So if you want to learn more, Sonja, she has a great blog on Medium. She's written a lot about leading and working, navigating complexity in general, but also described this framework. This is her website, and I'm shamelessly going to plug that we have courses with Sonja and also with Dave coming up. If you want to reach me, I'm at the crisp.se site there. So I think we have about 5 minutes or so for questions in Q&A. And I keep sharing the screen now so I can maybe point and if there are questions.
Good. There is the question in the chat from Rui. Would you like to put your mic on and maybe ask your question?
Sure. It's about the beginning of the talk. It's about defining complexity. So how can we determine if the environment that we are exposed to is a complex one? What are the main characteristics of an environment in which you can observe complexity?
Yeah, so are you familiar with the Canadian model?
Yes, I am.
Yes. So in that case, complex is the left upper part of the model here. The right part is more the ordered domain. So in this, there is also an example of where you have 3 domains, where actually the ordered one is on the right. The ordered can be divided into clear, very obvious what to do, and complicated, where it's very you need expertise, and you can use good practices to actually know what to do. So you can use plans, projects, etc. But when things are uncertain, it depends. If you ask experts and they might disagree, there are different hypotheses of how to do something. Yeah, then it's more complex, and that's when you can actually use the WaysFinder model. So I think that helps rather than saying yes, oh, you should do experiments or you should use some agile method. If you kind of take the WaysFinder model and say, okay, we're in a complex situation. Let's see if we have all these things in place. And maybe one support structure would then be using Scrum or some agile practices, etc. But it kind of puts things in context. Did that help or answer the question?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Is there any more questions?
How would you describe this direction thing? You pointed out it's not a place, it's not a clean target, it's like a space, it's a big room. But it's always clients ask me, so how could you describe, or what do you use to in a business context to describe this direction? Is it a vision statement? Is it a golden circle? Is it the center of it? What would you? I mean, there's no right. I know, no right and wrong. Just some inspiration.
Yeah, but I think, as I said, you can use this on different levels. You can use it like on an individual, team, department, company level. So for an individual, the direction would be to feel energized and fit. It's not just saying I should lose 10 pounds of kilos. That could be maybe a shorter metric. And for a team, it could be like successful launch in Germany of this new feature, for example. But what does success mean? We don't want to detail it up front, but we want to have some milestones, metrics, what success means maybe on the way. And as I think it was a good example for the on Volvo here, enabling the digital experience of buying and owning a Volvo car to be as delightful as buying and owning the car itself. That's the overall intent. That's what everyone should work for. Like the whole digital organization. And then each team or each product area, they would set their own intent then. So for example, onboarding should be frictionless, engaging, and something like this. So yeah, I think it shouldn't be too open, too wide, because then you get kind of confused. You can go in any direction, right? But if you too quickly narrow in on a very specific thing, how do you know that's the most important one? And then the kind of solution space is very narrow. You cannot be very innovative.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? No? Okay, super clear then. That's good. Great. Then we're gonna have a little short break and we're gonna come back with the open space agility.
Yes. Okay. Great. Thanks everyone for joining. And if you have questions afterwards, just contact me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.